In this video, we're dealing with 3 different questions, 3 different problems. You might want to fast forward if you're only interested in hearing the answer to 1 out of those 3. Number 1, the difference between Sanwa and Seimitsu buttons. This stick is all Sanwa components. And this one that I can barely lift, these are Seimitsu buttons installed custom. This stick does not come with Seimitsu out of the box, okay? That comparison, other people have made YouTube videos doing that before. I think all those videos suck, so I'm giving you my perspective on the matter here and now real quick. Question 2 is about the particular industrial design of this joystick and the other one. Why? Well, for one thing, both of these are available for sale right now. And if you buy them now, 2020, early 2021, you could probably get it at an okay price. Probably. Within another year after that, they're going to become priceless collector's items like everything else on the internet. The price is going to go up and up and up. These were available for about $100 US, like the day before yesterday. I had a fan write in and say he bought one for $250, although with 2 small control pads included in a bundle. I'm sorry, but the control pads aren't worth more than $30, $40. $250 is a lot to pay for this. So these things, their prices change, and they change dramatically, partly because there is so much sentimentality attached to this. And I guess that's part of the third and final portion of this video. I want to talk about why anyone would want to use such an enormous, seemingly clunky and inefficient piece of machinery. Why you'd want to use an interface that hasn't changed in 50 years in an era when computers are being more and more miniaturized, when the size of a cell phone keeps going down, and so much of our interaction with digital technology is through this kind of tiny touchscreen interface on a cell phone, on a portable computer, or what have you. My interest in arcade sticks is not nostalgic, but the reason why this is going to get more and more expensive is partly because so many people are nostalgic for the design. If you don't recognize it, this is Retro Freak reinventing the aesthetic and design of the old Ascii Stick. So ASCIIware was the company, and the original Ascii Stick made for the Famicom. Collector's item, worshipped. People call it heard another YouTuber refer to it as a god tier joystick, right? But the original Ascii Stick is only 2 buttons. It only has an A and B button, right? In terms of the main button, then it's select and start, like everything else for the NES. Just to mention, that stick, the stick that inspired this design, this strange graph paper design, this makes it look like a scientific instrument, this kind of geometric layout. That stick was not for the American NES. It was for the original Japanese Famicom. The American Nintendo Entertainment System, you could plug in a new controller. The Famicom, you could not. The controllers were hardwired in, right? So if you think you can just buy that stick and use it on a North American setup or a European setup, no. But yes, obviously, if you Google it now, people will sell you an adapter or sell you a modification. People obsess over this stuff. And that, again, is why the price is going to go up and up and up. And this is going to become a collector's item in its turn. Okay, so first things first. What I see most of the other YouTubers doing is just demonstrating the clicky sound. Like, oh yeah, you're going to judge the quality of this product by this. And then they add some adjectives, some really useless adjectives like mushy. Like, oh yeah, the Sanwa button, it's more mushy, whereas the Seimitsu button is more clicky. Okay, look. If you play the guitar, only one part of the sound of the guitar is created by the string. The hollowness, the hollow wooden space of the guitar is a significant part of the sound. This joystick has a lot of hollow space. It's really like a drum or a guitar in its shape. So that's part of it. You're not really comparing the sound of the button. You'd have to just click the button alone. But what does the sound tell you? And these adjectives like mushy, what do they tell you? Okay? Here's how I'm going to break it down for Seimitsu versus Sanwa. These are Seimitsu buttons. The minute you see them, this is natural light. I have no lighting on. This is just sunlight coming in through the window. The minute you see them at any angle, they light up the room and you say, wow. They make a big first impression when you look at them. And in terms of the tactility, they make a big impression too. You say, wow, This is not an ordinary button. This is something extraordinary, okay? The first impression of the Sanwa, by contrast, it's just ordinary. If you walked into an elevator and you pressed, 11th floor, you wouldn't say, oh wow, this is a Sanwa button. No, it would be a completely unremarkable, normal button. You click on it and you go to the 11th floor and you don't even think about it. If you walk into an elevator and the buttons look like this and the buttons feel like this, you go, wow, the landlord for this building, man, he really did something special with this elevator and these buttons, right? And that includes, there is something special about clicking the Seimitsu buttons. That's why a lot of people get them, okay? Bad news. These are the 1.5N spring strength Seimitsu buttons. These buttons were designed not for home use, not for you to type an essay on, right? Not for long hours bent over your desk doing hard work or studying or using applications to memorize Chinese vocabulary. No. These were designed for arcade operators whose attitude was, come in, put your 25 cents in the machine, play for 30 seconds, and get the hell out. Play for 2 minutes. These were meant to be used for a short period of time. I'm amazed. Anytime I use these buttons for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, I'm laughing out loud to my girlfriend saying, I can feel it in my shoulder. I can feel it in my chest. Like the amount of work, the amount of pressure, the strain for your hand and for your whole upper body. Use this right like that. It's astounding to me. I laugh out loud at how tough these buttons are. And I mean, it's special. It's remarkable. It's also completely counterproductive. Now, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe you, like myself, want to take a vow that you're never going to play video games for more than 15 minutes in a day. And this is going to remind you about the passage of time. If you play anything where you're expected to bang on the buttons like R-Type or something, like any of these games, it's just mind-blowing how much work. And I bench press over 200 pounds at the gym. I do 200 push-ups in a day. Not every day. Many days I do over 200 push-ups. Okay, I'm in okay shape. I'm not here keeling over telling you that the Seimitsu buttons are going to be the death of me or going to give me a heart attack. Okay, I'm not. It's not some of you maybe. When you think about how much your hand has to spread out, I'm 6'3". I got big hands. My girlfriend has smaller hands. To play a game where you got four, you're using all four fingers, you're putting that much pressure. There is a reason why the so-called mushy, unremarkable, aesthetically unappealing buttons from Sanwa is what all the video game addicts use, okay? In terms of the buttons, in terms of functionality, sadly, I gotta hand it to Sanwa. Like it's kind of the winner that way, right? With that having been said, why would you spend a whole bunch of money for a button that's unremarkable and unmemorable? Honestly, if you take the time to order these special and then install them, you're gonna feel ripped off. You're gonna feel disappointed because there's nothing special about them. There's nothing unremarkable about them. And what's worse, they have the exact opposite problem from the Seimitsu buttons, which is like when I'm going through a menu and setting options. Like let's say I'm using a program, because I've posted this on Instagram. I try to use these things to do memorization of Chinese. I was trying to use them for French language practice. I actually try to do productivity apps with this stuff. I wish I could use Joystick to do YouTube video editing in the video editing suite instead of using a mouse and a keyboard. I try to make productive use of stuff. But I'm using an app that only uses 2 buttons. And then I go into the option screen. I'm amazed to see I'm setting off the other buttons accidentally. I'm not even seeing them do it. I'm not even noticing it. Right? That actually brings us back to the design of the original Ascii Stick. The original Ascii Stick's design was kind of perfect for Sanwa buttons because it was just 2 buttons and then an ocean of smooth metal. This is a straight metal surface. Right? There was lots of space for your hand. You're not going to accidentally sit in them. Accidentally triggering these buttons is a problem. They have a light touch. They're a hair trigger. And by contrast with the Seimitsu buttons, that is not the problem, okay? There is going to be no digression in this video talking about the stick itself. This one down here, this is a legit Sanwa stick. My honest opinion about the joystick itself, narrowly defined, this piece of metal, I think anyone who's in business today in 2020, whether they are in Korea, Japan, China, or Spain, any of these manufacturers, they all make good joysticks. There's nothing worth obsessing about there. Look, people can obsess. Go ahead, obsess. I don't mind. Maybe 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, you could say that the actual stick made by Sanwa or made by Seimitsu was so much better than the alternative that it was worth obsessing over. Today, I just think the gap has really closed down. So when people talk about the small difference between Sanwa and other joystick manufacturers, they're talking about how much travel the stick has. So after you hear the click, how much further can you press the stick before it hits the limit? If you want to obsess over that, knock yourself out. What I'm saying is, in the year 2020, all these people are making good hardware. And that's because this ain't new. This is an incredibly simple device manufactured out of steel. You can make it yourself. You can literally assemble your own joystick in your garage. Don't try to make your own cell phone. Don't try to make your own tablet or laptop computer. Don't try to make your own car. But this is a mechanism so simple you actually could make it yourself. Good luck making your own Coca-Cola dispenser machine. Like a machine that can vending machine or something. A vending machine. That would be really tough. This you can make it yourself, and there are tons of hobbyists who do, right? So just recognize. This is one of the great things. This is like an obsolete piece of technology that's still here with us in 2020. And that's going to be point 3 at the end of this video. Moving on to point 2, because again, right now, you could buy either of these joysticks. This one has been customized. You guys probably know it doesn't come with this translucent purple ball top out of the box. It doesn't come with Seimitsu buttons out of the box. That was my hard work, if you like. That was my modification of the design. Terrible design, worth buying anyway. The first thing I want to say, maybe the last thing I want to say about arcade stick design is that you can't just look at the surface at the top. Look at this crap. Can you see this? All right. So the power switch is located here on the side with about 4 different buttons and another, what would you call that kind of switch? A slider for about 4 options. Any interaction between the user and these things on the side can and will accidentally switch the whole thing off. You think that's a minor problem? It's not. It's not a minor problem. You want to talk about a minor problem? This relies on you owning and not losing this poorly designed USB-A to USB-C adapter. All right. Now this is such a lousy piece of industrial design. I bought a new one made out of metal that I thought was better quality from Amazon. It doesn't work. They want you to use this one that comes packaged. That's really, really bad industrial design. It's still a wonderful product, but in some obvious ways, the design is unforgivably terrible. Why is it so enormous? Because this is designed so that you can use it either on a desktop or directly on your lap without having a desk or a table. It's bigger than a pillow. It's absolutely enormous, right? Terrible industrial design. Terrible. This looks a little bit more clean. Looks a little bit more tidy, industrial design, right? But you can't really use it on your lap, right? What they've given up and going for the smaller form factor is now you can only use it on a table. Okay, unlike the design it's an homage to or ripping off, the Ascii Stick, no empty space. The buttons take up so much of the space, right? There's nowhere really to put your hand. So we got some disadvantage. And the worst thing of all is the surface matters. So here you get an actual, I don't know if it's steel or aluminum. You get a metal surface right in your hands, which I think is great. I think that's wonderful, right? Surface matters. But when you look past the surface, the rest of this is just good. This is an ugly, poorly manufactured. Look at that crap. Look at that garbage. Whenever you look at the other sides of this thing, it's terrible. And I got to have this incredibly long USB cord bundled up. There's no way to retract it or modify the length. It's a huge encumbrance. Makes it. On the plus side, I already praised the actual surface. I think that's great. I think the throwback to the 1980s, it is an 1880s design from Ascii, is great. And you get a whole bunch of buttons, smaller buttons here at the top that you can assign. So if you're a nutcase like me who actually wants to try to do something productive, want to study languages, use memorization apps maybe, like Anki, where they shuffle the cards and you're doing repeat memorization. You want to study with this. You want to use some kind of having so many buttons that you can assign different functions to at the top, functions you may only use once in a while. huge advantage, right? So, and to me, I mean, it's kind of ugly and beautiful at the same time. There's something very appealing about this to me. That, as I'm about to get into, most technology in the 21st century lacks. Okay. So again, both of these, you can buy it now. They're probably going to double or triple in price later. And, let's give a point of comparison. This is currently cheaper than the very similar, closely comparable arcade stick put out by Sega. Sega's put out a brand new arcade stick with apple green Sanwa joystick and buttons. I hope they're true to their word. If people have pre-ordered that and they get it and then it's not Sanwa parts, they'll be really disappointed. But a very plain, in my opinion, ugly joystick, arcade stick has just come out from Sega. But allegedly with Sanwa parts. I'd wait for the reviews. And that's significantly more expensive. It's more expensive than both of them, actually. And I don't know, you don't get a whole lot of bang for your buck there. Okay, why would anyone drag this kind of technology with them into the 21st century? For me, it is in part despite the tendency towards miniaturization. And it's in part because of it. All right. I've studied many different languages. Can I do the whole list? Cree, Ojibwe, Pali. In the study of Pali, I was typing in Burmese, Cambodian, Laotian, several others. Well, of course, Thai. Ashokan. I don't think I skipped Sri Lanka. Sinhalese. All right, it's like, from the computer's perspective, I was sometimes using 6 different languages just in studying one language. I've typed in Japanese, Chinese, when studying those languages. I have a little bit of experience with Korean. All right, not to mention French and German, okay? Our conventions with the keyboard and mouse, they're very poorly suited to any one language. If you can just take a step back and be honest with yourself, how does this keyboard and mouse thing relate to the English language? It's poor at best. But when you have that comparative awareness, like, okay, I have experience typing and memorizing the layout for languages indigenous to India, Southeast Asia, Japan, China, like, I really kind of profoundly appreciate how awful 21st century computer conventions are, and how most of them have developed in an unexamined way, or you could say they've devolved in an unexamined way from like things that were short-term conveniences in the late 1970s, right, when these computer standards first emerged. So you can look at keyboards, there's a little bit of experimentation, 1970s, early 1980s, and then we've established a kind of orthodoxy as to what computer interfaces are. More recently, the arrival of the smartphone. Again, there's an early period of experimentation. You can look at the original Palm Pilot. You can look at the original Apple Newton. Shout out to anyone old enough to remember Apple Newton, right? And, and then quickly an orthodoxy, established itself. And nobody's thinking about it. I mean, of course, I'm interested in using computers in English. It's my main language. But I'm also interested in other languages. I'm also interested in other kinds of productivity. And a lot gets lost along the way. When I look back at my life in computers, all right, the single most effective and efficient operating system I have ever used was the one built into the Sega Saturn. And I used to have experience. In the old days, you could modify your operating system a lot more than you can now. I remember modifying the hell out of Windows 3.1 so that I had a totally different interface that looked like nobody else's interface. You could hack those old versions of Windows, probably why viruses is such a big problem. Yeah, my computer, it didn't connect to the internet. I did a computer, it was pre-internet or before internet. I remember modified the hell out of it so that it had a really effective interface. And then, I got a Sega Saturn for free because I was a journalist. I was a video game reviewer. You start up the Saturn, and there are just about 9 options on screen in a grid. You get to any of them in half a second. And you look at the mess that modern computing now, what my Macintosh computer looks like, what an Android phone looks like, and just how much meaningless busy work and memorization is imposed on the end user. And I've had to explain these things to Laotians and Cambodians and Thai people. Like, oh yeah, this is why you have to do, Command F and then this and then this. Like, I'm talking them through whether it's clicking through a bunch of menus or a bunch of arbitrary, keyboard commands. Most of them don't make sense to begin with in English. And I mean, if you've been doing this all your life, you may have taken on this burden. You may have even raised your own kids, and you start teaching your children these arbitrary conventions. You don't realize what it is you're carrying around with you, Now, the history of the joystick begins with a team of engineers who looked at the way you drive a car, who looked at the way you pilot an airplane, and who said, this is bullshit. And they invented a completely new paradigm for how people were going to pilot a helicopter. The development of the joystick is basically the development of how you steer a helicopter, right? There are a lot of reasons for why they wanted to improve that, including that with a joystick, you only use one hand, all right? You can use one hand. But this type of non-fixed wing aircraft, they needed something intuitive, effective, and you've got another hand to operate the radio or operate the gun or whatever it is you're doing in the military. There are other things you need to be doing when you have one hand on the joystick, and that is it. There was no need to reproduce the defects of the way the car steering wheel works, so on and so forth. And I just really feel this need to challenge the complacency of GUI design, graphical user interface design, to challenge the complacency of the keyboard itself, to challenge the interface between language and computing. And I do my small part. I'm doing this for years. I just sent email the other day to the software company that makes the applications I use for studying Chinese and said, hey, I'd really appreciate it. I'd really appreciate it if you could just optimize it a little bit for joystick use, for the joystick-based interface. And they wrote back to me. I had 3 different companies reply to me within the last week. One of them was a French guy. 2 of them were Chinese, to my knowledge, the people who wrote back to me. And all of them said, wow, we'd never even thought of that before. We didn't know anyone was using it with a joystick. Click, click, click. All of the inefficiencies in video editing software, even in just finding and opening the applications that are on your hard drive, right? In that the operating system menu at that level. Once you start evaluating it from the perspective of an arcade stick, you realize just how dreadful, just how wasteful the interface you've already got really is, and how much you've imposed on the user to submit themselves to this strange soul-destroying discipline. I'm going to do Command-Shift-Right bracket to align the text on the right. Really? You know what it's like explaining that to a secretary in Cambodia who barely speaks English, or English is their third language? You know what it's like explaining that to your daughter who's writing a book report? So, I'm just going to take these ridiculous, inefficient conventions that evolved in the 1970s and early 1980s, and I'm going to impose them on you. There could be a better way. There should be a better way. And we're now stuck in a situation where so much of computer hardware, computer software, and the role of the user has evolved in order to serve the lowest common denominator apps, in order to work well with something like Facebook. We're stuck in a situation where anything you want to do that's more sophisticated, more creative, more demanding is at the same time more convoluted, right? More of an imposition on you as the user. And it just doesn't have to be. So this is my rebellion against the logic of the 21st century cell phone, right? The cell phone is tremendously efficient in terms of the materials used to create it, in terms of battery life, right? There are efficiencies, right? But it's incredibly inefficient in terms of how it uses your time.